Thank you for staying with the big story. So let's still have this conversation on the swearing in of NASA leader Raila Odinga as the people's president, scheduled for the 12th of December. And in studio, we have Steve Ogola, who's a lawyer and a political analyst. We also have Elisha Ngoya, who's also a lawyer. Mr. Ogola, let me begin with you. There's a statement from the U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, that is Donald Yamamoto. He visited Kenya. And the U.S. is asking NASA to avoid extra constitutional actions, such as the proposed inauguration ceremony of NASA leader Raila Odinga. From now going forward, what are the legal options for NASA?
Thanks, Linda. First of all, let me paraphrase without the benefit of Mr. Ngoya's eloquence and state as follows, that a careful examination of NASA's program of action may actually reveal a subtle but sophisticated attempt to overthrow the Constitution. And it would be naive for any administration, the Jubilee administration, to continue to dismiss Raila Odinga as a man who is brandishing nonsense like a flamethrower, and that a man who is in need of care of assistance, medical assistance, the way I've heard in some quarters. What I have seen in this electioneering period, and I think I sort of restated that politicians, both NASA and Jubilee, are able to antagonize the people. They are able to manipulate the Constitution for partisan political benefit, and they have shown us that they have the capacity to operate outside the Constitution. Now, there is no legal response to the agitation that is going on, other than that the fact that it is a constitutionally offensive and perhaps fundamentally wrong in its approach and design. Because other than the fact that NASA wants to disrupt the order of governance, mock Uhuru's presidency, and perhaps bring it down so that there can be another election, there cannot be any other justification in law, because any legal justification, you must reference it in some law. If you look at the Constitution, which, Linda, is our article of faith, it provides us with a predictable pathway to everything that we want to do. To this limited question of ascending the presidency, the pathway has already been outlined and we've discussed it. NASA's pathway is extra-constitutional for whatever benefits it may have, if at all. Now, I think the way to examine this scenario is not to appeal to NASA to climb down through foreign envoys, because I've said the greatness of this country will depend on our ability to resolve our problems without external assistance. There is nothing that we can say inescapably, Linda, that will exclude the possibility of a direct contact between Uhuru and Raila Odinga. Let them talk. Let them negotiate. Let them settle. And I say this advisedly because in this country, we have realized and we have seen that when politicians meet and talk, what appeared to be irreconcilable differences, insurmountable challenges, suddenly disappear, and the people are co-opted into that new vision. Already NASA supporters, they have been whipped up emotionally, and they think, the People's Assembly, the swearing in, the delegitimization of Uhuru's government, all these are part of a sophisticated plan to continue maintaining the perception among NASA supporters that there may be another election, and if there's no election, there may be another presidency led by Raila Odinga. But you'll be pleasantly surprised, Linda, that if Raila and Uhuru were to appear somewhere in Zanzibar and emerge shaking hands, these fierce NASA supporters would immediately change tone, and you'll see them accepting and saying, okay, fine, we live to fight another day. Kriegler said in 2007 that Kenyans are excessively ethnic, and when they differ violently. Now, politicians have also learned to manipulate the ethnic nature of our politics for their own partisan benefit. There is nothing wrong with ethnic-based politics, because if that is the lenses through which you view your candidate, be it ideas or ideologies or ethnic angle, that's okay. But what is wrong and irreprehensible is manipulating the people, antagonizing them, manipulating the Constitution, looking for solutions outside non-constitutional frameworks for partisan political benefit, which is otherwise communicated as beneficial to the entire constituency, the way our fuller book is trying to tell the country. I think if Jubilee, because Jubilee is the administration in power. Remember, under Article 131, Linda, the president is the symbol of national unity.
Yeah.
And therefore, if the president fails to unite this country, fails to reach out to the opposition, he fails to reach out to Raila Odinga, that failure will not be attributed to Raila, it will be attributed to him, Uhuru Kenyatta, who sits as the president. He must show that he has made all effort to diffuse the tension and make sure that if there are any other outstanding electoral issues, because it would be naive to also think that just because the elections have been finalized, there are no underlying issues. I think Mr. Ngoya spoke to those underlying issues. How can we resolve this underlying issues? Some of them will be legal reforms, some of them will be institutional strengthening, some of them will be a culture of trust in our key institutions of governance. How can we get this discussion going on so that in 2022, we have lessons to learn from 2017 election and we don't repeat them in 2022. But I don't think, Linda, because look at Article 146, for instance, on the vacancy of the presidency. The presidency, for there to be an election, the vacancy in the presidency must occur either if the president dies or resigns or is impeached. Now, you know that Jubilee controls the majority in both houses. So the chances of Uhuru being impeached are minimal. Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto appear to be in good health, so the chances of them vacating office by virtue of death is also minimal. The chances of resignation, politicians compete for political office. The chances that Uhuru will resign are minimal, and if he resigns, he must resign together with the running mate. I think those chances are really minimal, and NASA's diminished hopes, if you allow, Linda, in terms of reframing the question, let them consider what is it that is achievable now. And what is it that can be worked with programmatically in the next 5 years? To initiate that discussion is incumbent on the president because discussion, negotiation is a requirement, is a constitutional obligation under Article 10. So the president, let him reach out to Raila Odinga and let him not continue to neglect what NASA is doing because Raila has a constituency that even if it's a mock swearing in, they will believe that Raila is now the president and they may disrupt the order of government.
Okay, Elisha Ongoya, this would be a good place to bring you in.
Yes.
So, via the letter that I told you was written, the statement that has come from the US, they're urging the opposition leaders to work within Kenya's laws to pursue reforms they seek, basically calling out for asking NASA to avoid or think out of, like, look for a way of sorting this thing out, but without swearing in Raila Odinga as the people's president. And there have been several calls from different leaders as well in the same line.
Yes.
What are the chances legally, Ongoya, that someone could go to court and actually stop this entire process by NASA? And by asking this, I know that they've said they don't even recognize the presidency, and listening into Haemba, they say they don't even recognize the office of the Chief Justice.
Well, I like being a bit moderate, Linda, for obvious reasons, that sometimes when the country is in extreme positions, it requires quite a bit of moderation to be able to get the way out. I have a lot of respect for the voices coming from outside this country, because they are lesser influenced by the local polarizing politics, notwithstanding that they have their own external interests. But again, those external interests are not illegitimate if you're dealing with a global world, a globalized economy. We must remember that in 2007, when we were almost decimating ourselves as a country, it took voices from outside this country to return us back to order. And therefore, I have a lot of respect for those voices. In 1994, when Rwanda was almost getting out of the face of the earth, we blamed the then American President Bill Clinton for not doing enough to intervene, meaning that to the extent that we want to hold others responsible for our fate, we must also have a listening ear to what they say. In that context, I must be a respecter of voices that come from outside this country, in spite of my clear understanding of the sovereignty of the Republic of Kenya and its people. And having said that, I therefore hold with respect the desire and the call by the American government through their top official that the political opposition should explore other methods within the framework of the Constitution. The paradox is that if you talk to NASA leadership, they'll tell you that they're actually operating within Article 1 of the Constitution, which will be part and parcel of the Constitution, but that's a debate for another day. Having said all that, another thing is that it will also be naive to imagine that the crisis we are in is a technical legal crisis. This This country is not in a legal crisis. It is not in a constitutional crisis. This country is in a political crisis. It's in a sociological crisis. For example, when people lose faith in institutions, they tell you we have no faith in the IBC, we have no faith in the judiciary. Faith is not a technical legal issue. Faith is a social phenomenon. It's about interpersonal relations. It's about trust in each other. And rebuilding faith in each other requires a little more than technical legal fixing of provisions of the law here and there. Therefore, we must ask ourselves, really, how did we reach this point where our faith in each other and our faith in institutions fell to these very low levels? But Linda, history also teaches us lessons. Towards the end of the 1980s into the early 1990s, just after the Mlolongo elections of 1988, there was a clamor for multipartyism. The constitution then was very clear. There shall be one political party, the Kenya African National Union. If you told a clamorer for multipartyism to operate within the constitution, and people tried, like George Anyona, went to court, and the court told them, but the constitution is very clear. We only have one political party in this country. It took what one may call, what Steve Ogola and what the American Republic calls extra constitutional efforts to try and get the country back to the nature of freedom we enjoy today in terms of a latitude of a multiplicity of political parties. We also remember in 1997, before we achieved what was then called the Inter-Party Parliamentary Group minimum reforms to the Constitution. Again, at that point in time, there were reactionaries within government who insisted we must operate within the four corners of the Constitution. It took a bit of action outside the framework of the four corners to be able to realize those minimum reforms. And even the realization of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Students of history will tell you that this constitution was written by the blood of some citizens in this country. And therefore, it's an unfortunate bit about our history that somehow, to the best of my reading of our history, far-reaching consequential reforms in this country have been achieved through either some threats or actual exercise of extra constitutional actions to be able to call to order, to call to sense those who sit within the four corners of the Constitution to see to it that they must operate within a particular state of affairs. Having said that, the question of impunity that I began by addressing is deep-seated in this country. I am among those Kenyans who deeply wish that without the need of the uncertain processes around the people's assemblies, the uncertain process around swearing in of Raila Odinga, however that will take place, I don't know from where I sit as the people's president, uncertainty around the meaning of the title People's President as opposed to the President of the Republic of Kenya, that we could be able to get an answer out of this. But how do we get that? I have said it requires social interventions. It requires people who have a semblance of humility, not a semblance, actual humility, to be able to realize that the power bestowed upon them by Article 130, 131 of the Constitution is a public trust. Okay. And that public trust demands that when there's grandstanding, they are the bigger people, by virtue of the power bestowed upon them, they can get down from the higher pedestal and be able to engage in a meaningful, practical sense to be able to deliver the country out of this. I share the frustrations of those who share humanity with Kenya, like the Americans, who wish that we could get out of this situation without the situation getting out of hand. I trust myself that we can do it in the next 6 or 7 days before the 12th of December.
Mr. Ogola, you get a final word in under a minute. Your final closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Linda. I think there's a serious disjunction between the law as it is and a matching political culture that reflects the status of implementation of that law. We are yet to update our culture to match the vision, the transformative vision of the Constitution. And part of that now is manifesting in what Mr. Ogola now calls the political crisis, and I agree. So a political crisis requires a political intervention. Do we need this intervention externally or we can do it internally? I'm of the view that since we can't waive the sanctity of our sovereignty when we are being held to account externally, but when Kenya is struggling with challenges, then now we can waive it and now require external assistance to reestablish the constitutional order. It's a huge embarrassment, Linda, and I say this with a lot of disappointment, that having a constitutional framework which is respected worldwide that we are still struggling with pre-constitution of Kenya 2010 issues, there should have been some level of decency, cleanliness in our politics and approaches to problem solving. I hope that you can still recapture that, Linda.
Okay. That is a good place to end this conversation. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Steve Ogola, lawyer, political analyst, Elisha Ngoya, who's a lawyer as well. I'd like to say a big thank you to Afula Bouquet, Director of Political Affairs and Strategy at NASA, and my colleague Duncan Haimba, who was able to give us a little bit of insight on what exactly is going on, the back and forth, as the country waits to see what exactly will happen on the 12th of December. NASA says they will swear in opposition leader Raila Odinga as the people's president. Good night. Thank you for watching. I'm Linda Ogutu. We'll see you in a few minutes on KTN Prime.